All right, here we go again. We're going to do case study number 2. It's about manufacturing case tailpipe assembly facility, welding. Has to do with welding hexavalent chromium. But you can see in this video, in this PowerPoint we're going to look at, that the authors here were doing some kind of presentation on it, because they're also talking about PDT, prevention through design business case. So we're going to go through it anyhow. Let's look at it. All right, let me get this thing up to full here. To demonstrate the elements of risk assessment, risk management, and PTD business case tool, this is a CRVI, which is hexavalent chromium, and ergo risk reduction case will be presented. Eliminating or reducing risk of injury or illness in the workplace is critical to maintaining a safe work environment. Yeah, we know that. This project examined hazards and determined through visual observations and sampling results at hand welding stations that most welding fumes are not captured using the current strategies. New engineering control solution was implemented. These engineering controls reduced the risk of hexavalent chromium exposure to welders in an exhaust tailpipe and muffler assembly facility. The ergonomic risks were also addressed. The project ended by determining the business case associated with that solution, or more succinctly, what was the value to the company for implementing this? So they're kind of taking a little bit different approach on this. Before we proceed to the case study and PTD BC model for description, a couple of important clarifications. What is the SH&B Safe, Healthy, and Environmental Business Case? A business case in occupational safety and health can be defined as a structured method used to justify a project, intervention, or solution for decision makers. It captures the effects of implementing programs or activities on employee health, injury or illness, hazards present, risk level, risk management, and the business process. The effects include customary financial business metrics such as net present value, internal rate of return, return on investment, payback period, which are meaningful to business management. In reality, the business case answers the question, what's in it for the company? A well-developed business case links safety, health, and environmental investments in protecting worker safety and to health the business value. The business case will assist in demonstrating that safety, health, and environmental activities are more than just an expense, but can indeed have a positive return on the investment. The business case provides support that SH&E professionals are integral partners in the organization and essential contributors in the bottom line. Now, you're all thinking, I think about sneeze. Well, excuse me. So that again, I've said this before too. Employers can think of their employees in two ways. They can think of them as expenses, and they can think of them as assets. And I think the most successful businesses think of their employees as assets. So, but sometimes you got to appease the bean counters, especially if the CEOs of bean counter, and demonstrate that what you're doing here is going to be beneficial to the company in a financial aspect as well. You have a lot of data at your fingertips, like workers' comp, stuff like that. So you have some power, some positive data there, or negative data. Really, workers' comp costs aren't very positive, but that you can use. But sometimes you got to go and do it just from a fiduciary point of view. If an SH&E protection project will be or has been implemented by business on business premises or in the direction of business, then a business case should be developed. Business managers may request a logical and well-considered argument, the business case, to justify funding to continue or expand existing solutions. Necessary resources for a new SH&E investment under consideration can be identified through the development of the business case. The business case can also be used to support the overall SH&E function when competing for resources against other functions, such as production within the organization. Now, that's a valid concern there. The business case development model uses 5 steps to determine and illustrate the business value of SH&E projects, programs, and activities designed to eliminate or mitigate the risk or reduce the associated occupational injuries and illnesses. For each step, the purpose is described. Modules with data collection forms are provided to derive the necessary information, and additional support is available through the following instructions that include a glossary. The PTD business case model includes the following steps. Step 1, describe current OSH conditions. Step 2, conduct risk assessment. Step 3, identify changes from current OSH conditions. Step 4, determine value, and then develop the report. So we're going to, and then to demonstrate the use of this, they're going to look at this study. Now, in the book, the study's in there, but without the business case stuff. It's a good one, too. The PTD effort was conducted by a mid-sized manufacturer of exhaust tailpipes and muffler assemblies for pickup trucks. The 20,000 square foot facility receives pre-cut tubing and mufflers, bends and sizes the tubing, and then assembles and welds the completed muffler exhaust units. The facility runs 2 8.5-hour work shifts per day, including 30 minutes for lunch and breaks. Risk assessment, SHD intervention, risk reduction, financial and non-financial benefits from the improvements were presented using well-established PTD business case methodology. Step 1, describe current SH&E condition. 5 production welders work on each shift. 4 are hand welders and 1 operates a Melton welder. During the morning shift, 4 welders use a handheld trigger-activated GMAW MIG gun equipped with an automatic filler wire feed. The welding stations were not equipped with local exhaust ventilation. Exposure assessment was performed as part of the risk assessment process. Beginning November 17, 2006, OSHA implemented significantly reduced PELs, permissible exposure limits, for hexavalent chromium from 52 to 5 micrograms per cubic meter and an actual limit of 2.5 micrograms per cubic meter. Exposures above these values mandate a variety of follow-up and corrective actions. Step 1 is the assessment results, the current assessment results. Now, the red is the OSHA PEL. Up here, they're dark red, and the dark color here is the action level. So you can see that 2 of the 4 welders are above the PEL, and all 4 of them are above the action level. So management wanted to reduce the welders' hexavalent chromium exposure below the PELs, I think it's supposed to be. Anyhow, now, to my way of thinking, just that alone would have been enough to justify this, not whatever money you're going to save. You got to do it because your people are going to die from hexavalent chromium or going to get sick or injured. So the design of the workstations was evaluated to address ergonomic risks. Using multiple risk assessment methods, the risk of hexavalent chromium exposure and musculoskeletal disorders was determined to be moderate to high. A team of IH consultants, ergonomic consultants, EHS and quality managers, engineers, operation managers, and a welder was formed. I'm glad I put a welder in there. So the project objectives included health and safety objectives, hexavalent chromium exposure below OSHA PELs, reduce lower back injuries associated with the welding stations, reduce shoulder and neck injuries associated with the welding stations. Now, I don't know if you guys have taken my ergonomics class yet, but if you have, you'll know right off the bat, one of the first things you walk a plant, you look for awkward postures. You look for people working like this or some way odd. And after learning a little bit about this, it'll kind of stick out. So none of these things that have to be addressed here in this example are anything that took a lot of difficulty to figure out, in my opinion. So operational objectives: improve company reputation, improve process cycle efficiency, retain talented employees. That's always a good thing to do, especially if they're still alive too. Helps too. Initial risk assessment was conducted using a modified preliminary hazard analysis method. 3 hazards were selected for further analysis: irritation and damage to the respiratory tract due to the hexchromium exposure, lower back injuries, and shoulder and neck injuries, and both of those are not ergonomic issues. And this is their current state hazard assessment, PHA. And here's the 3, 1, 2, 3, hexavalent chromium, lower back injuries, and shoulder and neck injuries. And they got 18 employees exposed, and they're all in welding production, and there's no controls, okay? So that's not very good, is it? After the initial risk assessment, the health risk of the current operation was considered not acceptable. 2 of the welding stations' exposure exceeded the hexchromium PEL. All 4 of the welding stations exceeded the hexavalent chromium action limit. Lower back and shoulder neck injuries were reported. Hexavalent chromium and musculoskeletal disorder health outcomes were included in the risk assessment matrix. And there's your basic risk assessment matrix that you've seen all these before. There's your risk matrix. And so they plug them in here, and there's your numbers up here, 12, 8, and 9. And that's just the same thing that supports this, basically, your frequency, and then your severity and frequency or probability. And they plugged them in, and that's what they got. They got for the hexavalent chromium, severity 4, probability 3, which I think is probably low if there's no ventilation there. I'm guessing the probability there would have been, they said 3 occasional, would have been likely, if not frequent, would have been way higher. But that's just my opinion. So then they did now this business impact review before intervention. They're going to, they're calling this the strategic impact organizational operation 3 impacts. And description of current controls, none. And then for the others, temp workers and overtime, how overtime is going to help on ergonomic issues beyond me. So hierarchy of mitigating business risk, accept, reduce, and reduce. I'm not sure what they mean by this thing here. It doesn't make sense to me. So anyhow, there we go again. Extent, likelihood, 12, 16, and 9. Strategic. Oh, now they're talking about strategic, organizational, and operational. They're not about safety here, but they did one on that too. It was apparent that control measures had to be implemented. The welders experimented with a new welding helmet with a supplied air system. Such control measures were very unpopular with the welders. The supplied air system was inconvenient for the welders, and productivity was negatively affected. Now, this happens sometimes. You might have the best thing in the world to make people safe, and they don't like it. It happens a lot, unfortunately. It interferes with them. Sometimes that's all you can do is make them wear it, and they'll get used to it. They usually do. But sometimes they have a legitimate complaint. So they did a straight bow tie, and those consequences. And all in all, this is way overkill for this particular thing. So I'm not going to really get into that too much. They didn't. Bow tie risk assessment methodology presents opportunities to safety professionals to present OSH standards and business consequences in one diagram. It was apparent that the higher levels of controls had to be implemented. Well, that's pretty obvious right off the bat. To reduce the hexavalent chromium exposure and eliminate the use of respirators, each weld station had to be equipped with unique local exhaust ventilation, LEV. Duh. Captured air is transported overhead to a conventional branched and tapered duct system where it is filtered and then exhausted. To address musculoskeletal disorders of the back, neck, and shoulders, adjustable welding workstations were designed. As a result, the following PTD solutions were agreed upon to reduce risk to welding operators. Anytime you have a workstation, particularly one that's not used by the same person all the time, you almost have to have some adjustability on it. PTD solution regarding hexavalent chromium exposure: an inlet pipe with a flare and flare on the end goes into a 4x4-inch support frame. There's your support frame on the front of the fixture. It also has a few perforated holes in the underside to capture some of the welding fumes. Let's see what it says in that one. Oh, inlet pipe 2.5 diameter with flare on that. Okay, so the welding's being done here, and it's picking it up right there. Overall system 12 inches reduced to 8 inches to 6 inches, and the flex going into the P2 fixture. So there's the second out here that's going up here and up overhead and out of the way. Good idea. Outlet end welds collected in outlet end welds collected by 4-inch diameter goes in the 4x4 pipe. The front of the fixture also have a few perforated holes on the underside of the 4x4. So under here, so to catch other fumes. It's a good idea. As a result of the PTD intervention, hexavalent chromium levels were reduced below the PEL and even below the action limit. So there's after you put this welding in. Big difference. Let me put the air transportation system in there, air cleaning system. So PTD solution regarding musculoskeletal disorders: all welding workstations were modified, including height adjustments. Risk assessment was conducted after the intervention as well. The same risk assessment methodology was followed to assess risk after the intervention. Risk assessment after the intervention. There's your air adjustable welding station workstations, and that outcome and business outcome there too. So They call these one strategic, one organizational, and operational. But we're worse worried about the health and safety. The proposed changes led to substantial risk reduction, financial and non-financial benefits to the company. Risk reduction is considered the most important non-financial benefit. SHD risk levels before and after the interventions were compared. I don't know how that would be considered non-financial, because if your risk is reduced, your accidents are reduced, and all the costs that go with an accident, downtime, lost time, training people, quality are humongous. So here we go. Risk factor without intervention, health and safety risk factor with intervention. And here we go. Then I got the math right here. This is a 75% reduction. That's a 50% reduction. And that's a 55.56% reduction. And then there is residual risk, of course, is this minus 100. It's all. And these two equal 100. Your risk, 62 is reduced. And you still have some residual risk. And that's your risk factor here with intervention. And that's just a chart of the numbers here for that. So you can see that just doing these relatively simple things, an air system, it might be expensive, but it's nothing that's nothing pushing the envelope for technology here, and neither is an adjustable workstation. So they were managed to do this. The non-financial benefits, strategic, business loss risk reduction, strategic, and I'm not going to go into details on the non-health benefits, but they come up with a huge one on that too. So good for them. Acceptable level of business risk, of course, yes, because you went from that, and like I said, that part of the study, I'm not interested in all that much. To be honest with you, I mean, sometimes you have to do it, but if you can't, on this particular instance, if you can't support the idea of because of the hexavalent chromium alone doing that, and that's probably the biggest expense. And the accident you've already had with vaccine, that should give you enough support for your cause to get this done anyhow. In fact, the hexavalent chromium, you have OSHA behind you. And that's one nice thing in the safety department is it's not you saying, hey, you got to do this. It's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration arm of the federal government Department of Labor saying you got to do this, or saying you got to do something. So, and a lot of times it always comes in your favor, but a lot of times you have to use that, and it's just a fact. You're not lying. Here it is. Okay, and they have dug up some dollars here that they haven't put through the ringer yet in here, so I'm not going to worry about them. They're saying that comes up and incident costs and all that, and they're going to save all this money. Exhaust system. Let me see. With solution. Without the solution, they're going to have $120,000 in year one, and that's medical expenses mostly, looks like. With the solution, they're going to cut that down, save $86,000. Okay, good. And here you have training, job rotation, annual testing of everybody else, and the other stuff you have to do when you have without the solution, and here with the solution, the costs. But we're not too much interested in the costs or the cash flow or the financial assessment. Non-financial benefits, financial success. Okay. Now you tell me how the financial success is a non-financial benefit. I don't know. Now they're up here, NFB, risk reduction. That's financial. Company reputation. EHS intervention leads to reduced external community exposure. Oh, they were dealing with it before. They weren't even getting it out of their plan, I don't think. Process cycle efficiency, fewer illnesses, disorders leads to improved employee performance. That's for sure. Employee turnover, that's good too. So those are all good things, but the safety thing is really the thing about it. And then at the end, this Georgy Popov come up with a 5-minute elevator speech, he called it, and that's awful slow elevator. The facility manufactures exhaust, tailpipe, and muffler assemblies for pickup trucks. The 20,000 square foot facility receives pre-cut tubing and mufflers, bends and sizes the tubing, and then assembles and welds them together. Main concern is hexavalent chromium exposure. Visual observations and sampling results at hand welding stations indicate that most welding fumes are not captured. Ergonomic injuries also a concern. So each weld station equipped with local exhaust ventilation, captured air. We talked about it. That was their solution on that. And to address musculoskeletal disorders, adjustable welding workstations were considered. They were actually more than just considered or put in. So using the PTD business case developer tool, the proposed changes were shown to lead to substantial risk reduction, financial and non-financial benefits of the company. Risk reduction was considered the most important non-financial benefit. The project team was determined the adoption of this PTD solution would be beneficial to the organization. This was, although an interesting case, it was kind of cut and dried as far as, what had to be done. You got OSHA telling you went from 52 micrograms to 5 micrograms. You probably got to do something. And anybody that welds, I don't know what they're welded on. What's called stainless steel, hexavalent chromium is an issue in the poultry industry. Heck, there's stainless steel. The whole plant's made out of stainless steel, pretty much all metal parts, and that was an issue. And they had a big fuss about it. But we went to one of these poultry safety things. There was a bunch of us, and some of the guys at bigger companies than OK Foods said the hexavalent chromium. They tried to measure it when they were welding, and they couldn't even detect any enough. They had to actually fake how much. Well, have a whole bunch of welding going on before they could even measure the hexavalent chromium exposure. So it really wasn't that big an issue with a little bit of welding that was done in an open place like a chicken plant too. So we didn't really have to do anything about it. But so anyhow, this was an interesting thing. They took two different things. They took ergonomic issues and took some health issues and solved them relatively easily, I think. So anyhow, that's the end of this one. So in the meantime, everybody be safe. And if I can get out here, it doesn't want to leave. Just gonna have to just I won't. I mean, for